Singapore has engineered one of the world's richest, safest cities, 90% homeownership, GDP per person higher than the United States, and almost no homelessness. But this model now faces a dilemma worth $100 billion. Public flats that most citizens depend on are unaffordable, birth rates have collapsed, and land is running out. What happens when a near-perfect society starts to fracture from its own design? The answers begin with the very numbers that once made Singapore a miracle. In just 6 decades, Singapore has vaulted from a struggling port city to one of the richest societies on the planet. Its GDP per capita now surpasses that of the United States, a figure that would have seemed impossible in 1965 when the island's future looked anything but secure. Today, the city-state is a showcase for what state-driven planning can accomplish. With gleaming infrastructure, an airport ranked among the world's best, and a public transport system that runs with clockwork precision. Nearly 9 out of 10 Singaporeans own their homes, most in public flats built and maintained by the government. Homelessness is almost invisible. Life expectancy matches the world's highest, and Transparency International ranks Singapore among the least corrupt countries anywhere. This transformation didn't happen by accident. Leaders built a system where the state owns about 90% of all land, directs investment through powerful agencies, and manages everything from urban design to social integration. The result is a society where order, safety, and prosperity are not just aspirations, they are everyday realities. International rankings pile up. Singapore consistently lands at the top for ease of doing business, education outcomes, and infrastructure quality. Foreign investors pour in, drawn by political stability and a reputation for clean government. From the outside, it can look like a formula for perfection, a city that solved poverty, banished slums, and replaced chaos with efficiency. But behind these numbers and the global admiration, deeper questions begin to surface. How does a society engineer such extraordinary results? And what happens when the very tools that built this miracle start to show their limits? Singapore's housing story begins with a sweeping act of state power. After independence, the government acquired roughly 90% of all land, using the Land Acquisition Act of 1966 to take control at prices set by the state. This legal foundation allowed the Housing and Development Board, HDB, to reshape the city, building more than 1 million flats that now house about 80% of residents. Homeownership rates hover near 90%, a figure that would be the envy of any developed country. But ownership in Singapore means something different. Every HDB flat sits on a 99-year lease. When the lease runs out, the property returns to the state. There is no freehold public housing, only the right to occupy for a lifetime or less. The HDB operates as both planner and landlord, deciding what gets built, where, and for whom. Most new flats are sold through the build-to-order system, called BTO. Young couples and families join a national ballot, hoping to secure a subsidized flat. If they are lucky, their number is drawn, and they wait, sometimes 3 to 5 years, for construction to finish. The process is tightly managed. Eligibility rules, ethnic quotas, and income ceilings shape who lives where. Financing is handled through the Central Provident Fund, CPF, Singapore's compulsory savings scheme, which ties home ownership directly to retirement security. Yet the system's strengths are now its greatest strain. Land scarcity and relentless demand have pushed prices upward. Median resale prices for HDB flats have reached more than 5 times the median household income. Even with subsidies and grants, young buyers face years-long waits and mounting costs. For many, the promise of instant security has become a test of patience and endurance. The very mechanisms that once delivered stability now threaten to lock out the next generation, raising uncomfortable questions about whether engineered abundance can keep pace with rising aspirations. Singapore's population story is now defined by what's missing. The birth rate has collapsed to just about 1 child per woman, a figure that ranks among the world's lowest. In 2024, the total fertility rate stood at 0.97, a number that stubbornly refuses to move despite billions spent on baby bonuses, parental leave, and family-friendly policies. The government's hope for a rebound has faded as each year brings fewer births, even in auspicious years like the Year of the Dragon. The reasons run deeper than culture. For young Singaporeans, the wait for a flat isn't just a housing issue, it is a life delay. Couples routinely postpone marriage and children while they wait 3 to 5 years for a build-to-order flat. The cost of starting a family, from childcare to education, is among the highest in Asia. And the pressure to keep up in work and school leaves little room for larger households. The consequences are now visible in the age pyramid. By 2026, more than 1 in 5 residents will be over 65. By 2030, that share will reach 1 in 4. The city-state is aging faster than almost any other developed country, putting immense pressure on healthcare, pensions, and the working-age population. To keep the economy running, Singapore relies on nearly 2 million non-residents, about 31% of its population, who fill roles from construction to finance. This dependency is both a solution and a new vulnerability as public debate grows over integration and competition for jobs. The demographic squeeze raises hard questions. Can a society engineered for stability adapt to shrinking families and a swelling elderly population? And what happens when the social contract built on prosperity and security faces the fiscal and social costs of superaging? Singapore's ambitions run up against a physical boundary that no amount of engineering can fully erase. The entire country covers just 280 square miles, smaller than New York City, and a quarter of that land did not exist a century ago. Since independence, Singapore has reclaimed more than 180 square kilometers from the sea, adding new districts like Marina Bay and Jurong Island. But each new project grows more expensive and technically challenging, with environmental limits closing in. Today, about 25% of Singapore's land is reclaimed, a figure unmatched by any other major city. Yet the island now packs over 8,300 people into every square kilometer, placing it among the densest places on Earth. For comparison, Hong Kong's density is lower, and even Mumbai, famous for its crowds, only surpasses Singapore in pockets. The pressure is visible in every direction. High-rise apartments stretch skyward, parks share space with expressways, and even the dead are buried in multi-story columbaria. Urban planners speak of a hard ceiling, a point where land reclamation, underground construction, and vertical building all hit practical or ecological limits. Every new home, train line, or hospital must compete for the same shrinking patch of ground. This relentless squeeze amplifies every other challenge, from housing waits to the stresses of daily life, and forces a level of planning precision rarely seen elsewhere. Long before sunrise, students fill the void decks and bus stops, clutching textbooks and tablets. In Singapore, the pursuit of success is a national sport. The word kiasu, a Hokkien term meaning fear of losing, has become a badge of honor and a warning. It shapes daily life, from the primary school exam halls to the open plan offices of the Central Business District. Children as young as 6 begin years of after-school tuition, joining nearly 80% of their peers in extra classes. By age 12, the results of the primary school leaving examination can chart the course of a child's future, determining school placement and, by extension, career prospects. The pressure does not let up. Singaporeans work an average of 2,238 hours a year, among the highest in the developed world. For many, this relentless drive is both a source of pride and a heavy weight. Sociological studies track a steady rise in youth anxiety and depression. The youth suicide rate has doubled over the past decade, now twice the OECD average. One recent graduate describes the cycle: years of grinding through exams, only to land in a workplace where long hours and constant assessment are the norm. The sense of always being measured, always behind, is hard to shake. In a society built to maximize potential, the cost is often hidden, felt in sleepless nights, silent competition, and the quiet fear of falling short. As the city-state pushes for ever greater achievement, the boundaries between aspiration and exhaustion grow harder to see. Singapore's model rests on a foundation of single-party dominance, where the People's Action Party has set policy and direction without interruption since 1959. This system delivered results that few democracies could match: near-zero corruption, streamlined decision-making, and the ability to marshal resources for long-term projects that span decades, not election cycles. Policy is not just coordinated, it is orchestrated, from housing allocation to economic planning and social order. But this level of control has a price. The same mechanisms that built prosperity now face a test that cannot be solved by efficiency alone. Aging, housing, and space constraints are converging into a fiscal dilemma. Official projections estimate that Singapore could face an exposure of $100 billion in the coming decades, an amount tied to rising healthcare costs, pension obligations, and the need for new infrastructure as the population ages and land runs out. The government's own studies warn that without major reforms, the social safety net and world-class infrastructure could become unsustainable. A policy historian puts it bluntly: the strengths of Singapore's system, centralized control, long-range planning, and a culture of discipline, are now the very things that limit its ability to adapt quickly to new risks. The question is no longer how to engineer success, but whether the model can absorb the shocks it has created. The answer, for now, remains unresolved. Singapore's engineered order delivers prosperity, but it comes at a cost. A fertility rate below 1.0, rising housing stress, and relentless competition. As each solution breeds its own contradiction, the model's limits become today's policy dilemma. Perfection by design is never free, and the bill always comes due. What do you think?